Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. So today I wanted to take a quick look at the European release of the Super Nintendo Classic Edition. I also wanted to talk about the differences that I noticed between this and the North American or US release. As you see on my box here, there's some damage. Kind of sucks, but hey, it is what it is. The main difference that I noticed, not the design anyway, but the box from the European region, I can tell the print quality, it's hard to show on camera, but it's not as good as the North American box, and the cardboard they used on this is just slightly thinner. Not a huge deal. It's just something I noticed comparing both of the boxes side by side. You're going to have a lot more multiple languages listed on here than the North American release, so the information is going to be repeated multiple times. Missed opportunity here. There's no, now you're playing with superpower printed on the lip of the box, but hey, it's okay, I guess. First thing I notice opening this bad boy up is we do not get a poster. What? Why not, Nintendo? Come on, man. We get a nice little manual, though, that is listed in multiple languages. You get a points card for My Nintendo, which I've already used the code. Sorry, guys. But the booklet, it's kind of neat. I like having little booklets. This lists multiple languages, so it's going to be thicker than what needs to be if you only read one language. This information was printed on the back of the poster that came with the North American version. I kind of think it would have been neat to just get the poster and the manual. Just paper, you know. I mean, I guess save a tree, but I wish it came with both the poster and the manual. That would have been nice. So we'll go ahead and take a look at the system in a moment. But the contents of this, we do get the power cable. No power brick, though. US version does come with the power brick. We do get an HDMI cable with the Nintendo logo printed on it, so that is nice. Same as what's came with the NES Mini in all regions. And we do get two controllers that are going to have the multicolored buttons, and they're all rounded. They don't curve inward on the X and Y like the US version, so that's cool. Sticking to the way the system was meant in Europe. But we are going to see some differences in a moment as far as software side of it goes. But it is cool. Two controllers, just like every other region. Now, for the system. Beautiful, beautiful system. I've always loved the way the European Super Nintendo and the Japanese Super Famicom looked. Love this power button. Love the reset. It's got the fake eject and the fake cartridge slot with the logo up top. Controller ports on the front, just like the US version. This one, it feels a little easier to open up the front ports, so that's kind of nice. Then taking a look at the bottom, the main difference is this PEGI 12 sticker. We do not have that on the bottom of the US version. Ports on the back, pretty solid, feels nice, very high quality. But let's go ahead and talk about the main differences, software side, between this and the North American version. So let's get this party started. Okay guys, now that we have the European version Super Nintendo Classic Edition booted up, you're going to see it boots up just the same. You have multiple languages you can choose from. The first difference that you will notice is up top, the A button is in red, just like the controller that the system came with and, you know, that originally came with the real Super Nintendo in Europe. In the US, we received controllers that look like this, that had the purple buttons. So on the US user interface, it mimics the purple buttons. On this, immediately you can tell they didn't cheap out. They actually changed the color scheme, so that's kind of cool. Now, once we enter the system, you may not immediately notice this because there's a lot of similarities between this version and the US version. Because if you first take a look, and we'll talk about this more in a moment, the box art is the US released box art. This is not the US released system, but the box art is the US released version. So you might see that, and that's just, you know, what you see. But the background that is moving is the Super Famicom styling, which is also the same style that the European Super Nintendo used as far as the color and the shape of the system. So they did change the background on this. I think that's pretty cool. And then you also see, if you've compared this to the North American user interface, the top and bottom of the screen are different on the US version. because the top and bottom is trying to mimic the look of the system. So in the US version, or North American version, you have the little purple buttons at the bottom of the screen that you can kind of see. Up top on this version, you have the blue, red, green, and yellow logo, which is not on the North American release. And behind me, we do have the power button, or not the power button, but the power LED, the little light that's on the front of the system. So that looks different. So those are immediately the differences that you see. Now, once you go into menus and whatnot, all the buttons, the way they're listed, are going to correspond to the color that the actual controller uses. So they changed a lot. It's just not immediately noticeable if you haven't paid attention to both versions. Now, the biggest thing, that it's not that it's a difference, but it's kind of weird, because I've seen some people complain about this. I don't know how widespread the complaints are, but this being the European version, you know, I received mine from Amazon UK. So mine was a UK import, but all across Europe they received the same version because it is multi-language, and you know, in Europe they had, you know, this style was what they received. But there's some issue with this using the US released box art. For this to be a European release and it's using the US released box art, some people kind of find that strange. Like, why didn't you use the region box art that this was released in? We thought this wasn't a universal thing. If you released it and it was the boxy looking US version of the system, and you just said, hey, this is a Super Nintendo Mini, the North American version, this would all be okay for everyone. But like I said, I don't know how widespread the complaints are with that. I've just seen some comments bring that up, that it's kind of weird that they did that, yet they changed everything else as far as the user interface goes, but they kept the US box art. And then the other thing, this does include exactly the same games that the North American or US released version has. There's an issue with that, be it positive or negative. There's a couple. The European, the PAL version, you know, was 50 hertz, the original Super Nintendo. So a lot of the developers back in the day, they might not have compensated properly for that, and some games suffered because of that. You know, you lost frames, you know, there were certain things with issues with slowdown and stuff like that. And that was a developer issue. It wasn't the constraints of 50 hertz. It was just the developers didn't optimize to that, essentially. You know, I'm sure there were some that were fine. I don't know my complete history about, you know, European Super Nintendo games. This is just what I have seen and heard over the years, that was an issue. But with this being US released box art, it's also the US released ROMs. Now, with that, these are all 60 hertz. So that is a positive, unless you're a purist and you're like, no, I want the 50 hertz. But no, this is all 60 hertz. These are the US released ROMs, not just the box art. It's the US ROMs as well. The reason being, I mean, I don't know the complete reason for it besides the 60 hertz issue, but it kind of reeks of a little bit of laziness in a sense to not change the ROM set, because I'm sure there was a lot of PAL exclusives that people in Europe would have been like, hell yeah, I would have loved to have that on here. Because for an example, Contra 3, the Alien Wars, and I don't remember off of the top of my head, but I know in Europe it was not called Contra. There was a different name for it. And Contra 3, the Alien Wars, was never released in Europe as Contra 3. It was released as a different title, different box art, everything. So in Europe, you're getting Contra 3, the Alien Wars. Now, some people might be cool with that, some might not be, because it wasn't released that way. And then the other thing, which could be a positive or a negative, because sometimes if you don't know what you're missing, if you never had it type of thing. But let me find her here. Here we are. Super Mario RPG, Legend of the Seven Stars. This game was never released in Europe. Never. If you didn't know that, well, you know it now. This game was never released in Europe. This was only released in North America and in Japan. So PAL region, people in the UK, all across Europe, they did not receive a release of this game. So it's cool, I guess, to get something like this that you never had. But then at the same time, there might be some people that look at it like there's already too many RPGs on here. Why couldn't you give us a PAL exclusive instead of a game we never received? So that kind of, could be a positive or a negative. You're receiving something you never had, or it's taken a place of something awesome that was exclusive to your region that should have been on there. I don't know. I don't live in Europe, so I'm not really familiar with exclusives that came out there, but I could see people viewing this in two different ways. Because like I said, never released in Europe. The game just never was released there. So that's kind of weird, in a sense. There might be a reason behind all this. The 60 hertz thing could be part of it, but then another part of it could have been like, hey, we don't want to change up, ROM sets. We don't want to have to get multiple licensing agreements. I don't know, I'm not on the business side of things with Nintendo, so I don't know what their choices were. But, for kids, who aren't kids anymore, but grown adults who are kids and had the Super Nintendo in Europe as a kid, this is not going to have the same kind of nostalgia with this US released box art. Now, if I bought my North American Super Nintendo and it had the PAL region box art, I'd be kind of annoyed. I'd be like, this isn't what I know. So I could see some people being annoyed with the way Nintendo chose to do this. Kind of strange. I don't know. I'm not 100% familiar with all the PAL region box art. I've seen plenty. I actually have some PAL region carts. And a couple complete in box, so I'm familiar with the some of the differences, but not all of them. But that's pretty much it. I just wanted to show, like, hey, there are some differences between the two systems, and there's some weird choices that I don't quite understand. Maybe I'm not meant to understand it. Maybe somebody out there could tell me, if why did Nintendo do it this way? And also tell me what the heck was CONTRA called in Europe, because I can't remember for some reason. Drop a comment down below. Let me know so I can, take a gander at that. But I hope you guys appreciate checking out this video. If, you have any thoughts on this issue or the differences or why the European version was designed in this fashion, just pretty much just being the US version, throw out your comments down below. I'd be very interested in hearing what you guys have to say. So with that said, guys, smash that like button. Subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. And I will catch you guys next time. Boom!